Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to today's seminar, and I'm pleased to present our speaker today, Dr. Alan Blum. Dr. Blum is a professor in family medicine at the University of Alabama, based in Tuscaloosa, and he also is director of, I can't remember the exact title, but it's a institute that is very, very much engaged in dealing with tobacco issues in our state and nation. A little bit of his background I found out from him. He grew up in New York on Long Island. He has been the editor of two different medical journals, the New York State Journal, Medical Association Journal. He's also been editor of the Australian Journal of Medicine. And he has been somebody that is very, very devoted and committed to dealing with one of the major health problems that we have in the United States. In fact, I would say the major health problem. There was a study published a number of years ago in JAMA that was entitled Actual Causes of Death. And the number one actual cause of death in the United States is cigarettes. And that costs us about 500,000 lives a year. So he's going to address our student body today about what pharmacists should be doing to try to deal with this problem.
Great. Thanks, Dr.
Okay,
oh, good. I'm mic'd. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. You know how this talk came about? I was at the state meeting on tobacco over the summer in August, and I sat down at a random table, and I met two really interesting people, Charlie Darling and Gerard Akins. I'm trying to think of Eric. Okay. And they passed along the word to Dr. Jungnickel, and the rest is history. So I'm very honored to be here. I grew up in New York. My father had his general practice and above a pharmacy. So he'd park me down in the pharmacy, and I had my own mortar and pestle, and I used to compound, M&Ms and jujubes and put them in little capsules. So I absolutely love this. And I've also co-authored an article with a former Auburn faculty member, Amy Stump, on grapefruit drug interactions. I'm a big grapefruit fan, and all my patients weren't eating grapefruit because they read that the grapefruit will kill you, And so we actually researched this and found that almost every class of drugs can be used if you pick the right one. And also have co-authored some articles with another pharmacist that we both know, Lucinda Miller, on cost and how little physicians know about the cost of medications. And out of 100 physicians that we surveyed at a CME course, how many do you think could get 7 out of 10 correctly of the course, a typical course of 10 very common medications? We even gave the 4 answers as a multiple choice. Only 1 out of 100 even got 7 out of 10 correctly. So I hope that one of your roles will be reminding physicians, hey, do you sure you want to prescribe that? That's really an expensive drug, and if you substitute generically, it's the same manufacturer. So these are the kinds of things that I hope that we can work together on. I should warn you that any talk on smoking is going to have to come with my own Surgeon General's warning that this talk will be hazardous to your preconceptions. I mean, let's face it, everybody over the age of 2 has heard that smoking is dangerous to your health. So there's probably nothing on the surface that you think I could really add to this. But I think I'm going to try to mess with you a little bit. And my goal is to have you going out of this particular talk thinking differently, saying, gee, I never thought about it like that before. And that's what I do with every patient, because I think it's important not just to get people from sick to well, but to have them with that hope of getting even better health than they had and thinking about things differently. We're facing a terrible epidemic of lifestyle difficulties. Obesity now is really surpassing smoking, and we're not doing a very good job. And I think the reading that Dr. Jungnickel sent out was the commentary I had in Sunday's Birmingham News about how we have utterly failed to teach our health professional students how to champion lifestyle. So I hope at least that message will get through. Just keep in mind that I don't think I'm anti-smoking. I don't think anyone here is anti-smoking. We're anti-smoking, you could say, in a way, because it's become a kind of a professional thing where the only thing that people do on smoking these days is to give Chantix. And believe me, that's a very risky business to simply assume that a medication for smoking is the answer. I like to tell the story of Harry Truman, who was I think a very great president, and he was also great because he was very candid and very frank, and he had a bit of a foul mouth. And the story is that one day he was at a garden show, and a woman came up to him and said, "Would you like to look at my flowers?" And he said, lady, I don't know a damn thing about flowers, but they look like damn swell flowers. And what'd you use, some damn swell manure? And by this point, the woman was so embarrassed, she turned beet red and went up to Bess, Harry's wife, and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should have him saying more polite words like fertilizer. And Bess just laughed at him. She said, it took me 25 years to get him to say manure. So I hope it won't take more than 25 minutes for you to ever use, not to discard the term anti-smoking. We're anti-heart disease. We're anti-cancer. We're anti-emphysema. We're anti-high health costs. Now, and...
Hey, Phyllis, I thought you quit smoking. You were going to be my inspiration.
Not anymore. Now I can smoke as much as I like. Now that I got the lung brush.
Lung brush?
That's right, Lung Brush. Created by a small inventor in California who himself enjoyed smoking. Lung Brush is the easy, inexpensive alternative to quitting or cutting down. Here's how it works. Taking hold of the easy grip handle, slide the gentle bristle device past the tracheal opening, back down the windpipe and into the lung itself. The unique Lung Brush design allows you to remove caked-on tar, smoke particles, even city smog phlegm. Freeing up clogged bronchial passages so vital for breathing and smoking. And Lung Brush's sturdy design makes cleaning and maintenance a snap. One Lung Brush may be the only lung brush you'll ever need.
Here's football great Kenny Stabler.
I threw my light and low-tar cigarettes away. Now I'm back to my favorite brand again. Thanks, Lung Brush.
Time to come to bed, dear. And don't forget to brush.
Lung Brush, that is. So get into the Lung Brush habit today. And smoke to your heart's content. Lung Brush is available wherever quality tobacco products are sold.
Only $14.95 from Life Tool.
Well, you know, we can inject a little humor. I notice, you know, a lot of these seats are empty, and Dr. Ravis' section is, it's going to come in and fill that any minute. He's getting his last smoke out there. But, you know, I think the important thing is that we have to have some humor. I hear he's good-natured about it. That's why I mention it. But if we were to take this issue so terribly seriously, we would all be crying all day long. I've had the unfortunate privilege to care for many people who've gotten lung cancer from smoking and emphysema. We just admitted one yesterday. And there's a great deal of denial. There's a great deal of guilt. How many people here just in this particular auditorium have had a family member whose life has been affected by smoking? I'd say about 3/4 of the hands went up. And when I go even to a 6th grade class today and talk to the kids, their hands go because Mama and Papa are dying of this, or they had an aunt that died of smoking. We all know this, but it's the translation of this that really is the challenge that I'm making to you today, to play a role. And I'm going to be pretty hard-hitting when it comes to the pharmacist and, of course, the chain drugstores. I'm going to take you through some of the epidemiology that I think you ought to master. And I'm going to do some very brief stuff on smoking cessation, but then really hone in on the pharmacist, and then, of course, what we might be able to do in the community if we have a little time in this talk. There's a very important Alabama connection to this issue, because the most famous report ever issued on smoking, and one of the most landmark reports of the 20th century, the Surgeon General's report on smoking and health, changed everything. That was issued in 1964 by an Alabamian, Dr. Luther Terry.
Tonight's CBS Reports begins with this historic announcement by the Surgeon General of the United States on January 11, 1964.
It is the judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
As simple as that. One committee meeting for 1 year in the bowels of the National Institute of Medicine Library, which is named the Lister Hill Library now because Lister Hill was a senator from Alabama. Tremendous Alabama connection here. And there was another member from Alabama on this committee of 10. They met for 1 year. They had never spoken publicly on smoking. They looked at the world's 11,000 articles on that up until that time, and they said, this is overwhelming. There's no doubt. And why would they even have had to meet? Because every time an article came out about smoking in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the tobacco companies would say, we need more research. And they're still doing that today. They don't acknowledge in court and all the lawsuits against them that smoking can actually hurt anyone. But they'll say it publicly now, yes, we put the warning on there, as if that removes their obligation to be ethical. So the report was necessary, but then what happened? Where are we 50 years later? This was the Life magazine of that day, of that week, in January of 1964. It didn't even make the front cover. Why would something like that reports that this is the single leading cause of death and disease in our society that can be totally preventable, make the front cover? Because, as you can imagine, Life magazine had lots and lots of cigarette advertisements, but they couldn't ignore it. And indeed, this press conference was on a Saturday when the stock markets are closed. There was a lot of concern about offending the tobacco industry and worrying about tobacco stocks. This was a mainstay of our economy. But at the very same time that this press conference, the very same year this was going on, look what else any child in America could turn on.
The Flintstones, brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? And what are they going to be laughing at us some 50 years down the road? One of the things they're going to be laughing at us is if we sit on our hands and we don't do anything about this issue. And I will contend in this talk that CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens, among the other chain pharmacies, are inhibiting health promotion. And that's the thesis, the underlying thesis of this talk. You've interned, many of you, in these stores. You're finding yourself in the uncomfortable position of bagging these things or dispensing them, and it's a disgrace. There's no health professional on earth that should be involved in the sale and distribution of this most lethal of all products. 12 million Americans have died, and that's a very conservative estimate, from smoking since that report was issued. You know, that's literally, I guess you could say, the combined populations of New York and Pennsylvania every year. It's just astounding what we don't deal with and what we do deal with. And this was issued a few years ago in 2004. 50 million Americans still smoke. Now, there were about 50 million Americans that smoked in 1964. But, of course, the population has gotten bigger, so the prevalence is much smaller. But still, look at your cohort. Who do you think the cohort is today? Now, just imagine for 10 seconds that you're a tobacco executive. And you put on your hat, you go to work, and you say, now, everybody's hearing about the dangers of smoking. Who do I want to get? Who do I want to have as my cohort? I don't want those hacking, wheezing 70, 80-year-old people who are trying to stop smoking anyway. I want the invulnerable 20, 30-somethings, and that's who they are getting. We have the youngest cohort today of people who use tobacco products. Our state has smoking going up. It is not going down. This is a disgrace. It doesn't matter whether we have the resources or not. We have you. And we have a lot of good health professionals that need to get involved. This legislature would be disgraced if just the half of the number of people in this room were to sit in Montgomery this year when that session goes and considers the bill that's going to be introduced for a statewide Clean Indoor Air Act, which has failed 11 straight years. All they need is a number of people in the health field to go down there and be present for this session, and that's what we have failed to do. Our state spends less on tobacco prevention than almost any other. We are almost rock bottom. We're not curbing smoking. This is the prevalence chart that you can get from the CDC, and you'll notice Alabama it ranks around 42, 43 in terms of worst. Obviously, Nevada, with all the gambling and drinking and so forth, and Kentucky and West Virginia. I didn't know myself about Indiana, that they're not doing very well. But we're right up there, right after that particular ranking. Our prevalence is much higher than that. It doesn't look like that's much. But in fact, men have an even higher prevalence. So you're talking about 25% prevalence of smoking in the men in Alabama. When you compare it, how do you compare what this is? That's such an abstract number, 7,500. Well, about 6,000 of those deaths are from heart disease, and that's what I wrote about on Sunday. But let's just come up with another analogy. Each of us, as I was this morning driving down here, is at risk for a road accident. And we read about every single one of those in our state that's a fatality. And it's on the nightly news. They're covered 100%. I think it's actually 97% of the fatal automobile accidents in this country makes it onto the evening news. When was the last time you saw any report of yet another Alabamian dying from cigarette smoking? Zero. It doesn't happen. It's just part of the landscape that we accept without examining it. So how many road deaths are there? Anybody want to call out the number of road fatalities in Alabama every year? And try it?
500.
Good guess. Anyone higher or lower? It's about 1,000. So we're dealing with 7 times the deaths from tobacco compared to automobile fatalities in the state of Alabama. If you look at the top 6 causes of death, the only thing that I see that they have in common is smoking. In other words, heart disease is related to cholesterol, but cholesterol is not related to cancer. cancers related to smoking, but cancer, fortunately, doesn't seem to have any of the same factors other than smoking for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is number 4. Stroke is a vascular disease related to smoking. Accidents. Now, what in the world is accidents? Why would you think accidents would be on this list? One word. Thank you. Fires. Appreciate that. That's either a fraternity or sorority fire that actually killed a couple of people. I think this was a fraternity fire in Mississippi, actually. Going to look at the next condition, coronary artery disease, heart disease. This is the New York Times from 30 years ago, but notice how they talked about coronary heart disease on the front cover and sold you a pack of risk factors for it on the back cover. Now, I only mention this because you say, well, that's 30 years ago. But when did the New York Times stop running cigarette ads? For many years, we used to write to the New York Times and saying, why do you do that? You don't run ads for guns because you think that's bad, but why do you run ads for cigarettes? And they wrote back and they said, well, when Congress bans cigarette advertising, we won't take the ads. Isn't that nice of them? Well, it was 10 years ago, 1999, that the New York Times finally said, and they got great praise for this, that we won't run any more cigarette ads when the damage was largely done. How does smoking affect the heart? It's twofold. One, the myocardium, it deprives it of oxygen. Simple as that. And this is what you can remind everyone. The chance of recurrent heart attacks is doubled by, more than that, by smoking, but recurrent heart attack again, as opposed to primary. And primary heart attack obviously is a major risk factor. Smoking is a major risk factor for that. Just keep in mind depriving a muscle of oxygen. And the other half of it is the coronary arteries. You have a double whammy there with nicotine constricting the arteries and also the deposition of plaque. It's even believed that the very deposition, the first stages of that, the laying down of the fibrinogen, is tipped off by smoking. There's some trigger beyond just the pollution of the carboxyhemoglobin as opposed to the good hemoglobin. There's believed to be a mechanism that is actually a direct laying down of plaque. And some people, of course, believe that heart disease is a kind of a cancer. So this is there's nothing redeeming about this. You won't find any diseases except possibly ulcerative colitis that smoking has done any good for. And nobody knows why the ulcerative colitis does it either. This is a chest x-ray, obviously, with the bad lung on the on the right, but there's an artifact on the left, that little dot up there. If you had just that dot on there, that would be more cells than you would probably be able to survive. So that's why chest x-rays and even so-called spiral CTs are not good diagnostic tools for lung cancer. They're trying, and it's better than nothing, but the fact of the matter is this is a poor way to go. And I have patients all the time that say, oh, but they said I had a normal chest x-ray last year. You know, and then the next day is when it finally became visible. So don't believe that a chest x-ray is a way to diagnose things and change things. I used to say that this was the good lung on the left and the bad lung on the right, but somebody reminded me that, wait a minute, that's not really still in the person, so it's not exactly a good lung anymore either. But we don't know, we pretty much know that this person did not smoke, and this one did. Now that anthracotic staining with the lung cancer there as well could have been also a coal miner, because there is quite a lot of that. Could have been a lot more pollution there. But the incidence of lung cancer in New York City is the same as in rural Alabama. And the only thing that those two places have in common is the cigarette smoking. I started to say on Charles Barkley, because he used to play all around the country. But, and this is a survivor of thoracotomy. So this is a very fortunate patient who had a lung removed and agreed to have his picture shown. But here's where it gets gruesome. You look at the estimated cancer deaths, and you see lung cancer and bronchial cancer more than threefold for men and nearly double that for women. It's truly astounding that we don't hear this, we don't see this very often in our daily newspapers or in our women's magazines. The death rate for men from cancer, fortunately, is coming down in almost every kind of cancer. You see those lines declining. The news isn't good for women, however. Although most of the cancers are declining, you notice that this lung cancer curve is really still creeping up. In other words, although there are still more male cancer deaths by about 20,000, or 50, the proportion is now 7 or 8 out of 10 male to female. This is, anyone want to hazard a, try this condition? Because this is important, just to know what the cross-section of that one looks like. Anyone want to call out what that is? Yes, thank you very much. Emphysema. Because you recognize it, because instead of that smooth kind of processed cheese consistency, it's like Swiss cheese. You could drive your fist through that. And I think that the only redeeming thing I've ever heard of emphysema is one of my patients who is a grandfather told me that he loved going to his grandchildren's pool parties. And I was trying to figure that one out. And then it hit me, and he said, and he said, yeah. He says, I can't sink. So it's like bobbing for grandpa. They pop them down, and he'd pop up. And because what happens with emphysema is it's like bubble wrap. Your lungs are like bubble wrap. You know, you press the bubbles, and the more you press, the bigger the space gets, and that's not good. You want lots of little rooms, you want more surface area. The combined surface area of many little rooms is far greater than that big room that you eventually get with emphysema. So it's like having an inner tube, and basically you can't sink. So what emphysema is like living with, he also told me. Imagine if you go underwater and hold your breath, and then you come up again for air, and someone pushes you down immediately. And that's what it's like 24 hours a day living with emphysema. It's now 1 in 20 people, not just people who smoke, although over 80% is attributable to smoking. The heart disease rate with diabetes is tripled. You got those two conditions, your heart disease rate is tripled. But if you smoke and work and have diabetes, it becomes 11-fold. What about asbestos? But doc, they've got asbestos. I can't work. You know, I mean, it's crazy. I've had a patient with asbestosis, and I said, didn't you wear a mask? He says, heck no, you couldn't smoke if you wore a mask. I mean, and how does that work with asbestos? Why is that so bad? Because your cigarette is like a little vacuum cleaner. And you're sucking up anything in the air, and you're sucking up all those asbestos particles. It's as simple as that. If you work with asbestos and you do not smoke, your risk for lung cancer is 3 times. That's a tremendous increase, 3 to 6 times. That's 300 to 600%. If you don't smoke, but if you smoke and work with asbestos, your risk is 81 times, or 8,100%. That's who gets asbestosis, by and large, is people who smoke. And all the other conditions related to cotton dust and tungsten and various other metals that people work with in mines. Look at all these other conditions. I could be here all day just listing the conditions related to smoking, bones and eyes, but this is what changed the world. When 2 researchers, one in Japan and one in Greece, separately and independently studied the effect of, what they found, they wanted to understand why is it that some people get lung cancer who never smoke. So they studied those populations. And who did they turn out to be? They turned out to be, of course, the spouses of people who smoked heavily, as well as the co-workers of people who smoked heavily. That's when we started realizing that your cigarette affects me and my cigarette affects you. That changed the whole world, because now clean indoor air ordinances, such as we're hoping will finally pass in the state legislature, the last of 50 states to do so. And because now it's a matter of public health. It's not just a personal freedom and a personal lifestyle. It's sort of like, people say, oh, well, I'm just smoking. That's, it's not bothering you. It's like, sort of the no peeing and peeing area of the pool. There's no such thing. And so this is the tragedy that but it had to take these studies to realize that. So no longer could someone say, oh, yeah, I had an Uncle Louie. He smoked 3 packs a day. He lived to 80. Well, but Aunt Mary lived with him, and she died much younger because she had to breathe in all that. He might have had a different constitution, but he might have had a better life, too, if he hadn't smoked. But the whole point is it's not just longevity, it's the quality of life. Secondhand smoke in and of itself is now considered the 2nd leading cause of cancer deaths in the United States after smoking. So we're talking nearly 3,000 deaths a year now attributable to the effect on smoking from other people, and heart disease deaths. And there are 2 million visits to the emergency room every year from asthma. In the state of Washington, they've actually had children taken away from the parents because repeatedly they're coming back in and they've been warned and they don't listen. That's a problem. I'm not in favor of that, by the way. But, what are you going to do? This is a cost generator beyond belief. We're talking now about premature infants that are far disproportionately represented among parents who smoked. It's not just the mom, it's the father, too. And these are what I call the $1 million babies. And what are you going to do? You're going to guilt trip the mom? I'm not so certain you want to do that. But you have to figure out a way during that pregnancy to work with people to get them off this material. Look at all these connections. Low birth weight, premature labor, spontaneous abortion, premature rupture of the membranes. Now, I'm not going to talk to a grieving parent and say, your kid died of sudden infant death syndrome because you smoked. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, though, this has been an associated factor, and we have to be aware of that for prevention purposes. Even school performance has been related. Gee, Mommy, you sure enjoy your Marlboros. This is almost 55, 60 years ago that you could actually have a baby in a cigarette ad promoting Marlboro. That's when Marlboro was a woman's cigarette, mild as May, red tips to match your pretty lips. And then something happened, the Korean War. And the guys went off to war, and they came back, and they weren't greeted as heroically as after the Second World War. And so the advertising agency for Marlboro cigarettes said, we got a great idea. Let's put a tattoo on this guy's hand, and let's create the pack, a new pack. And it went from being a woman's cigarette to a male cigarette with a war medallion, which is what a Marlboro pack looks like. And I grew up with this.
Marlboro country. Famous Marlboro Red or new Marlboro 100s, the Longhorns. Come to Marlboro country.
Imagine that, growing up night after night. And that's what I did as a child and as a teenager, growing up with Marlboro country. And how do you ever hear how people go into the BP station and order cigarettes? How do they say it? What do they say? Give me a pack of nicotine? No, how do they order? If you've been a pharmacist or whatever and you've been in the store and somebody says, give me a pack, what do they say? Like a pack of, somebody said it. How do you order cigarettes? How do you order beer? Do you go and say, give me a 6-pack of beer? Oh, can I have something with alcohol? No. You say, how do you do it? Yes, so speak, Tom, say the real language. Pack of, that's it? What, Marlboro what? Marlboro Lights, Marlboro Regular, Marlboro Reds, Marlboro Menthol, Marlboro Leaded, Marlboro Unleaded. I mean, filter. Okay. But the whole point is how many Marlboros are there? 40. There's 40 different in the Marlboro brand family is what they call it. And if you went to the University of Alabama, you would know this because they recruit our students. They don't recruit in Auburn. Budweiser does here, but they get, you can go work for Marlboro Cigarettes and you be a Marlboro sales territory manager. It's true. That's a whole other talk. But, so they got off television. Cigarettes were banned from TV, right? They were, but why were they banned? Why were cigarettes banned from television? Who did it? Who got them banned? Was it Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America? Was it the hospital associations and the American Medical Association concerned about this? Was it the broadcasting companies themselves because they were responsible? Or what would be the reason why cigarettes were banned from television? Congress? Did Congress do it because they were so concerned about our health? What would be the reason why cigarette advertisements were banned on television? Who was responsible for that? What single force said, that's it, they're off? Somebody's got to have this one. Try it, anything. Who got cigarette ads off television? Who would? Say it. C. Everett Koop, very good, excellent. That's a good answer. C. Everett Koop, he was the Surgeon General of the 1980s. No, it wasn't him. This is 1969, 71. They went off the air in 1971. What was going on? Remember, the Surgeon General's report was 1964, so they finally got him off the air in 69 because Congress did vote for this, but who was behind it? Who said, let's get him off the air? You'll never guess, right? What's the opposite of who you'd think? Somebody said it. Cigarette companies themselves. Why? Why would they possibly get off? Because there were beginning to be anti-smoking commercials. Now, there was a guy from Perry Mason, Bill Tallman, who used to play the district attorney and saying, I used to play the loser, now I am the loser, I've got lung cancer. So take some advice from somebody who's smoking and losing. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit now, don't be a loser. Those ads were powerful. They actually got people to stop smoking. And unfortunately, when were they put on the air? They were put on the air 2, 3, and 4 o'clock in the morning as a requirement for the fairness doctrine. And they'd ask the broadcasting companies, why do you only put them on? They said, oh, we want to get the children when they wake up to go to school. No, the tobacco companies knew that they can't take competition. They couldn't take these anti-smoking. Cigarette smoking was beginning to decline because of the anti-smoking ads. And they recognized it before anyone. And they said, oh, we'll get off the air if you give us an exemption from antitrust. The cigarette ads went off the air. The very next day, you started seeing these on sporting events. And can you read the warning from the back of the room there? Anybody? Sarah? No? Read the warning? No. But the point being is, this was on TV even cheaper than it ever was. You could count 5,000 single mentions of Marlboro in a single Marlboro-sponsored auto race on television, and they were only paying for the billboard. And what is the biggest single sporting event in Alabama for 35 years? What did you call it? You said it? NASCAR, but what was the real name for it for 35 years? It was called the Winston Cup. So you had 250,000 people gathering under a Winston billboard twice a year. So you had 500,000 people just, and of course I had my picture with Miss Winston, and I mean, I got into it too, but I did it from photographing all this stuff. I'm going to show you a picture of that. Meanwhile, the people in the health field, they're scared to death to offend the tobacco companies, and so they're doing peer pressure. Oh, it's your peer pressure, and it's the parents, that's their fault. But nobody wanted to look at propaganda. So is this peer pressure? I mean, this was everywhere, just as little as 10, 15 years ago. This was Joe Camel. You go to New York, and you'd see an 8-story high billboard. This was at 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. See the children crossing the street. That was the magnitude. So I went across the street. There was another billboard there, and I gave the guy $50 to let me climb up there. And I don't like heights, and I'm looking down at 8 stories, and I don't even come halfway up to the O in that sign. That's 1 million people got to see that every day. And if nobody says anything, it becomes Big Brother, it becomes acceptable to you. I saw this young lady in an airport in London. I asked her if I could take her picture. She wondered why I asked her to turn around, but it's called youth marketing. Get them while they're young. So you're going to wear somebody's logo? They should pay you to wear their logo, but people love this Marlboro gear. You can go to any airport and see Marlboro gear. Now, this is Sean Marcy. This picture was done in the early 1980s. He was a 19-year-old track star from high school in Oklahoma. He'd won some of the state championships. And after 7 years of using Skoal and Copenhagen spitting tobacco, he developed an oral cancer at age 19. He refused the surgery, which would have involved cutting off half of his face. This is very much what the oral cancer looked like, and he died at age 19 from oral cancer. Now, when I go and show this in schools, the kids, they don't want to see this. They'd much rather see this Skoal race car. They don't want to make the connection between these two. And now, this is promoted all over. It's even bigger than ever. This is Rice University, on the grounds of Rice University in Houston. 10 years ago, this is the Texas Medical Center in the background. And look at all the people lined up to get their free samples of Skoal. This is the Sigma Nu House at the University of Alabama right after the A-Day game in April of 2008, where 92,000 people filed out and they could get their free Skoal as well. One of the brothers was a Skoal rep. Now it's snus. Does anybody know what snus is? Anybody have seen this at all? Snus. Who's familiar with snus? Yes. Do you want to describe it? Excellent. It's a spitless tobacco. These are smart people. They didn't know that. They knew that for women especially, spitting is not particularly nice. So they figured out a way to use these pouches in your mouth. So all of you could actually be using this, or I could be using this now and you wouldn't know, because I can now swallow this stuff. Yeah, it's perfect time. And it's just, it's called snus. But think about it. They're trying to get you to stay maintained on nicotine so that maybe when you get to a place where you can smoke, you'll do that. So this is not a cessation thing, but they're trying very hard to promote the notion of harm reduction. No one is going to suggest that this causes lung cancer, but it still maintains the nicotine addiction. So we don't know whether it's something that will get you off of smoking or not. I don't know. When I saw this, first thing I thought of was anus. I mean, you know, but that's how you really probably ought to be looking at this. They even give you a little instruction booklet, you know, exactly how to, I mean, if you're that stupid, which is who they want, you're going to have to learn how to do this. I mean, you know, and I'm not trying to call people stupid, but I think the fact of the matter is there's, you know, two French fries short of a Happy Meal if you're going to buy this, you know. And it's of course the smoking imagery too. It's keeping that notion. This is an image of a cigarette lighter, but it's frost the fire. It's this kind of cross between coolness and the heat of smoking. Now, this was a drag race track, which I thought was marvelous because you had the ambulance saying, just say no to drugs underneath the Budweiser and Winston signs. Because they don't want you to stop and think that the leading causes of death in the United States, the leading illegal drugs are, in fact, tobacco and alcohol, because those are the ones that the kids use. The number one illegal drug in the United States is really Marlboro Lights. This is at Talladega. I thought this was fascinating because in the background you could see the Winston Thunderdome. And then in the front here it says free health screenings for Pfizer. There were all these mini-skirted girls saying, come on in, guys, and take this test. Now, I had a feeling what this was. I didn't go in. I wasn't certain. I still, to this day, don't know what kind of test they did. But this was, of course, the Viagra Racing Center. And, I mean, you have Mark Martin with his Winston sign here and his Viagra, and he says, if I could help just one guy. I thought that was obscene. How many guys has he helped to hook on Winston whose kids are not going to grow up seeing that guy? So here's your same Pfizer company now pushing, of course, Chantix for smoking cessation, a drug that is now banned by the FAA for the use of airline pilots because it makes you loony. It can. And I think just to assume, as I've heard some of my own doctors say, oh, that's right, on the phone. Oh, you smoke? Oh, okay. Well, let me call in a prescription for you for this drug Chantix and call me in 12 weeks and let me know how you do. That's not smoking cessation. That's nothing. That's being susceptible to Pfizer Pharmaceutical Company making a lot of money. Again, 46 to 50 million people, 45 to 50 million people still smoking. Most want to stop. 40% try each year. 5% succeed. What that means is that with nothing other than you're tapping them on the forearm and saying, hey, why don't we try this here? You yourself are the agent of change. You are better than Chantix. You can, of course, give a placebo effect to any drug you want. And, of course, I know that there's a risk of the displacebo effect. If I say, don't do that drug, I'm unfortunately dampening people's enthusiasms that has been raised artificially by the TV commercials. So I'm aware that there's a tension there. And I'm not saying this is a worthless drug. I'm only saying that when you hear the term evidence-based science, it doesn't generally apply to smoking. William Castelli, who did the Framingham Heart Study, once told me that I asked him what he thought of meta-analysis. He said, well, meta-analysis is to analysis as metaphysics is to physics. I mean, it's not really scientific to talk about effectiveness in smoking cessation. How do you do a double-blind study on smoking cessation? You can't. People know within a day whether they've got the placebo or they've got an active product in their mouth because they know what the buzz feels like. They know what withdrawal feels like. And let's face it, we're a long way off from having just a chemical fix for smoking cessation. These are serious markers, however. If you meet someone who smokes 20 cigarettes a day or more, who smokes as soon as he hits the floor, who has depression, and who also drinks, or any of the above, those are serious markers that you have to slow down. What I'm saying is that depression is a marker for smoking, and smoking is a marker for depression. Some simple tips that I use, and I never give a drug out of the gate. I will always work with understanding people rather than assuming that any person is supposed to get a drug. Now, the clinical guidelines do recommend that everybody gets a drug, and I don't agree with that. I think we need to talk to people and find out who they are. And I like to work on how to relax them. I like to work on choosing oral substitutes like mint, cinnamon, lemon drops, kissing, whatever they like to do so that I can suggest that. I like them to pick a buddy. I like them to work with somebody. The most important question that I can ask is, who among your friends or family has stopped smoking and stayed stopped? We're finding that the social networking there is more important than any drug. And you'll see it if you've looked in your own families that that's often how it works. It's very hard for one person to stop and not another one. I do a little simple breathing exercise. I recommend that they postpone each cigarette 5 minutes. They can put a pencil, they can do anything else. Just give me 5 minutes, that's all I ask. And then at the end of 5 minutes, and meanwhile to practice deep breathing, closing their eyes and relaxing, and then to reconsider. So it's postpone, inhale, reconsider, or RIP, spell backwards if you don't do what I'm suggesting. But the other important thing is to look at the situations, not to smoke right after with coffee, not to smoke in the car, to try to break down those situations where a lot of people feel that they're their own boss and no one's going to tell them not to. So those are the things that you need to identify. There are some myths surrounding smoking that it relieves stress. Well, anything relieves stress. I mean, there's a lot of things that relieve stress, but if you keep saying that smoking relieves stress, people will believe it. It can also make you hyper. Nicotine has a very funny effect on people. It's what you want it to be. But I think that, like keeping your weight down, 1/3 of people lose weight when they stop smoking, 1/3 of people gain weight, and 1/3 remain the same. But think about it. Smoking to lose weight, I think it's sort of like burning down your house to have roast pig. I mean, it's not exactly, it's an old story, but you wouldn't want to, it's not bright. But Doc, I smoke Carlton because it's only got 1 milligram of tar. And I said, well, Susan, the problem with, let me explain to you. She's sitting there and it's sad, and this happens every week. It's total denial. And this guy that we admitted yesterday, he's like this with emphysema. He was going to crash right there in the office, and he's talking about, why aren't we talking about his cataracts? I mean, he's sitting there barely breathing. And this is the tragedy of this particular issue. But low tar, still smoking. Low tar. What is tar? Tar is a composite of 4,000 solid chemical poisons. It's the condensate if you liquefy cigarette smoke and then you condense it and then you fractionate it, you get about 4,000 chemicals, including over 35 known cancer causers. That's tar. Another word, more scientific, is carbon-rich anabolic products, or CRAP, or crap. So you wouldn't ask someone to go out and buy, oh, give me that Wonder Bread. Buy me a loaf of Wonder Bread, would you? Because I heard it only has 1 ounce of crap in every loaf. I mean, you know, that's just not how. Or get that tuna that has the one that's Starkist that has. I heard that only has 2 ounces of arsenic in every can. I mean, it's just crazy. You wouldn't do that. But that's how cigarettes are sold. It's all deception. What about the filter? Why would someone want to? What does the filter do to you? Think about it. What is a filter? What's it made out of? What were the early cigarettes made of? How did the filter get on a cigarette? What is the filter supposed to do? It's supposed to work on your mind to think it's safer. Of course it's not safe. What happens when you're drinking a milkshake and you get a little ice stuck in it and you have a straw? What do you have to do? Yeah, got to inhale harder. That's what smoking a filter does. You're having to suck harder to get that flavor in through. You're increasing your risk for emphysema and heart disease. Very few people are saying this. And I think that this is the tragedy. The filter is a fraud. 95 to 98% of people now buy filters because they say it's safer, but they can never get the word out. Safer. It's just all in the mind. And the early cigarette filters were made out of asbestos. That was the first cigarette filters. And so safe, so pure, it's used to filter the air in many hospitals. Cigarettes today are made out of a little wad of cellulose acetate. You can actually unravel it like a little roll of toilet paper. And, you know, it's not used, but when you put it in your mouth and inhale, you're actually increasing your risk for these dire conditions. What color is menthol, by the way? Trick question. Good. Glad nobody answered that one. But what would you think it is? What color is menthol? Oh, see, I thought you would say, as a chemist, I know that it's clear. Menthol is an anesthetic. The color of the pack is green, so you get half credit. Green is cool. Menthol is cool. It's not. Why do they put menthol in certain brands of cigarettes? To deaden the back of the throat so you think it's not as harsh. It's a dirty trick on our patients. So the filter's a fraud. Low tar is low crap, right? Lights, just more sugar, and menthol is an anesthetic. I tell each patient these things. I shift the focus onto the product. I count how much money that people spend. I had a Marine that told me, he went like this. He says, man, I've smoked a Porsche. He calculated what he had been spending on cigarettes. I had a pregnant lady. I said, I got to talk to you about your smoking. I don't want to talk about it. I had a bad childhood. I don't know what that meant, but I said, can I just ask you one question? She said, okay, one question. I said, how much do you buy? How much do I smoke? I smoke I smoke a pack a day. Are you happy now? I said, okay, that's just a pack a day. And I calculated in front of her, $4 a pack, 365 days, that's about $1,500 a year. And she went, wow, I never thought about it like that before. That means my husband's buying $3,000 a year and we're on welfare. That family is spending $4,500 a year on cigarettes. They have the lowest disposable income. And that's the problem. That's who's buying cigarettes today. I also created the inhalation count. This is another way to impress upon people how much they're breathing in. Cigarette is 10 inhalations. Pack is 20. That's 200 inhalations. Times 365 is about 70,000 inhalations a year. That's like going up to a bus and saying, hold it. Let me just go down to the tailpipe. Man, and do that 70,000 times a year. That's what smoking is. It's truly a tragedy. You know there's good news. If you stop smoking now, in one day, the risk of sudden death goes down. It's amazing. Stroke risk halved in 1 year, and heart disease risk in 15 years. There's some good things, too, the cosmetic benefits. But I want to also get to...
Hello. If you've just given up smoking, you may be experiencing some withdrawal symptoms. But don't worry, the craving usually goes away after a month or so. In the meantime, well, you just have to hang in there. Oh, Brucey, I need you.
I show this just to get a little light.
Quit line now.
This is in England, but I think it's important. By the way, the withdrawal really is as little as 72 hours. You get through that period of time and you're home pretty well. Again, let's just mention the drugs, nicotine replacement therapy. We may be able to use these judiciously, but I don't think that they're a substitute for some of the behavioral approaches. The electronic cigarette, we could spend a whole hour on this. It's not so far to be proven to do much of anything other than to maintain nicotine dependence. You've heard of bupropion, which is Wellbutrin, clonidine, nortriptyline, and this is the big one now, the Chantix. I don't deal with medications other than as a last resort or a second resort. They are not a first-line approach, in my opinion. I think the role of pharmacy, just in the last few minutes, is important. Don't think you're doing a great job just because you happen to be ringing up all those Chantix and Nicoderm and Nicorette and Commit sales. I don't think that that really makes you an ideal American pharmacist for American Pharmacist Month. It's a lot of people making a lot of money off a lot of product, but there's no human contact there. Now we're seeing that the social factor, this is from the New York Times from 3 years ago, this is a fractal. This showed you in 1971 all the people that smoked that they looked at with the Framingham Heart Study data. All the larger circles were groups of people and families and friends who smoked together. By the 90s, they had seen who stopped smoking. They stop in groups. They stop. So there's that social factor. I think it's the most important single information I've learned on smoking, that if you can work and get people working together on this, such as also in groups in the workplace, you'll do better than just giving drugs to individuals. There are lots of other policies in our society. I personally favor clean indoor air laws, and I favor education on TV. But I think the other issues also have some impact. DOC was a group that I started to educate the public in refreshing ways about the major preventable causes of poor health and high medical costs. We wanted to shift the focus away from nicotine onto Marlboro, away from lung cancer and onto how it's promoted, and away from the smoker and onto the pusher. And who are the pushers? They're the American tobacco companies, which I call cancer's 7 warning signs. Philip Morris makes Marlboro and Virginia Slims. Reynolds American makes Winston and Salem. Lorillard makes Newport. Those are some of the examples. U.S. Tobacco has been purchased by Philip Morris. They make the spitting tobacco products. So what do? Just a couple of words about what you can do. You can give prescriptions of your own in your pharmacy to patients to give to their kids, to give to the parents. One of the best lines I ever heard was the 11-year-old boy that said to his mother every time his father lit up, "Say, Mommy, are you going to get married again after Daddy dies?" He stopped. He stopped. But that's what you can do, is use your own educational tools as a reminder. Put that in with all your other prescriptions. And yet when you go to a pharmacy these days, this is what you see. The Smoke Busters Center at Walgreens right next to the Marlboro Center. And if you go back 80, 90 years, the pharmacist was actually used in a Chesterfield ad. All the good things that pharmacists do to be professionals, one of which was, at that point, promoting cigarettes. I found this ad from the 1950s for Father's Day. This was a full-page ad for a pharmacy in Auburn, New York, in Aurora, New York. And notice at the top half there is the Father's Day cigar boxes, and there was also the personal brands of cigarettes by the carton that you could get Dad. By the 1980s, you could go into Eckerd Pharmacy, and hats off to Dad on Father's Day, and get him a carton of his favorite cigars. And this was in Eckerd's Pharmacy actually going back to the 40s and 50s. Notice all of the emphasis on tobacco products in the checkout counter. And by 1980, this is what they look like. They just got bolder. Where are we today? This is a store that I found in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Pill and Puff. I mean, you couldn't get any more ridiculous than that. But here's where we are. You're talking about the chains that have wiped out, sad to say, so many thousand independent pharmacists who were the bulwark of their communities. And they're everywhere. I mean, this is a trick photo, but, you're gonna see, this is terrible. You don't need more pharmacies like this. You need more independent people helping the community. And look at how CVS pretends that it's so good for the community. Education, healthy opportunities. That's just nonsense. When I walk down the street or I drive down the street, this is a disgrace. Today they were advertising some beer keg. But the fact of the matter is, this is what's going on. This is within a mile of where I live. And this was shot just last year. This is unacceptable. This is an outrage, and unless you speak out, nothing's going to happen. This is Rite Aid about 20 years ago with their holiday tobacco specials for Dad. And not many people realize that Rite Aid had its own brand of cigarettes right through the 1980s, the Rite Aid Quality Seal cigarette, a pharmacy making cigarettes. Oh, this is your Rite Aid more recently. Now they're the good guys. They're selling Commit. Of course, they're also selling the 6-packs and the 24-packs of Budweiser. And they're good health. You can't do this. You can't be a schizophrenic in full view and not be on some kind of medication. I think we ought to just pump drugs into Rite Aid, to help their schizophrenia, because there's no other way that they can live with themselves if you point this out as ethical pharmacists. This is Walgreens 20 years ago in the Chicago Tribune, a full page, this was the half of a full page ad, selling a carton of Marlboros at Walgreens. And this is Walgreens today, the healthy pharmacist, the one that's going to help you. And their website, they're way too well, their health education and prevention. This is their image. This is what they say it is. Oh, you got a child with a respiratory infection? Come to Walgreens. We'll help you. We want you to be healthy for your child and to take care of your own children. And they're broadening their healthcare reach. They're starting clinics now, in-store clinics. You can go get your cigarettes and you can go get a checkup. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. They're testing. They're doing diabetes testing. And Walgreens is serving beer again in most states. This is a store in Brooklyn that's got its own growler, what do they call it? The growlers that you can go fill up at your local Duane Reade pharmacy. This I picked up off the street in Tuscaloosa. They're proud of the fact that they're the best priced kegs in town. A disgrace. This is Eckert's with its beer and its Marlboro. And Walgreens just this month announced that they're introducing a wine for Heart Month. Take Heart and Give. This is the February promotion this month. This is what Walgreens, this is what they did last year. Buy a paper heart for $1 at your nearby wall to support the American Heart Association. And now in San Francisco and Boston and elsewhere, Western New York, they're saying, that's it, enough. No more cigarette sales in pharmacies. And guess who is the leading opponent? Your friend, Walgreens. They're fighting tooth and nail for the right to still sell heart disease products in their pharmacies. San Francisco passed the ban. Marin County said, that's a great idea, let's do it too. And it's spreading. The idea is spreading because people are finally speaking up. Boston did it next. And Walgreens is fighting it to this day. But beginning with this market, this is a chain of markets in California, they said, that's not a bad idea. And Wegmans in upstate New York said, that's not a bad idea. And they stopped it. So there's nothing preventing Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid from stopping it. The California campaign warned that tobacco industry profits may be hazardous to your patients. You've got to take that responsibility. This was an article that we did 20 years ago on pharmacists who dispense cigarettes. This is from a tobacco industry trade journal talking about how drugstores are big business for tobacco sales. This is how California pharmacists are beginning to unite to fight smoking. This was an ad campaign in California to help a persistent cough, go to aisle 8. To get a persistent cough, go to aisle 14. And if you want to be really tough, are you in business with a racketeer? Because they've been found guilty of racketeering by a federal court in the United States. The biggest case in history by the U.S. Justice Department, the tobacco industry, are now considered racketeers. And would you want a hospital emergency room to be selling ammo or an Alcoholics Anonymous to be selling booze? Then why would you want a drugstore to sell cigarettes? This is Ontario, Canada. This was the model for this particular program. They were the first in North America to ban cigarette sales in pharmacies, and it's all across Canada today. Drugstores are caring, personal places. You want to get your bread and your milk and a diagnosis, that's fine. But you don't want to undermine it with the products you're selling. Now the push is to have appointments with a pharmacist. All well and good, but you're not going to get my support for caring for all these millions of patients if you're still selling products that kill people. Tobacco Coalition forms against drugstores. This is what we did in Tuscaloosa. I simply did the research in one day. I found out which drugstores in Tuscaloosa were still selling cigarettes. It was only the chains plus one independent pharmacist. They stopped many years ago. If anyone wants to stay, I'll show you a little video clip of our own thing. It's called Your Drugstore and Cancer Center that we created for the Buffalo Museum of Science. But just to conclude, when you see these billboards, we're fighting for your life, remember that the Heart Association never really lifted a finger to fight smoking where it really would have made a difference, because the tobacco companies were always saying, we offer you more. And that's been the motto of our era. Take out a map, look at your communities, take out a calendar to see when the kids are out of school. Take a camera, send me pictures, I'll make you a member of our team. We call it the Fast Action Response Team. And look at these billboards. They're not there now, but they're there in nightclubs and elsewhere. And we couldn't get up on these billboards, so we went to bus benches welcoming people to the taste of country fresh arsenic. And you can imagine the first few times people were driving by, what's this new brand? I've never seen this. Well, this is the way to do it. Let's put some humor back in this. Let's laugh the pushers out of town. During Black History Month, which is this month, do you really want a picture of one of our great scientists, George Washington Carver, in a cigarette ad? So we took out a billboard that's a bus bench that said 10 years supply, only $7,000. And now it's a lot more expensive than that. Think about money and how much it's... This was up until 1990, hospitals permitted smoking. We agitated for this. We helped get smoking banned in hospitals. Smoking causes fires in hospitals. Discover Arctic Lights. This was an old brand that we spoofed by saying Discover Arctic Lungs. Anything you can do to laugh the pushers out of town. This is Iman, the famous model. She's not going to smoke. Just take a look at her mouth. It's just part of her looks. This is called nicotinic stomatitis. That's what smoking does to you. That's the kind of image we need on billboards. We created the Emphysema Slims tennis tournament. You've coughed up long enough, baby. And this guy who says, hey, I smoke for taste, we got a much more macho brand, say, hey, I smoke for smell. Because that's really what smoking is all about. Laughing at it, trying to make fun of this particular, you go to a party or the couple, and this was a brand called Dakota that was advertising, and instead of saying Houston is famous for big deals, big domes, we said, Houston, home of the largest medical center in the world, asked you to make up your own mind, Dakota to cough to cancer or to coffin. And they wouldn't take that ad. Newport is the boomerang. It'll come back to haunt you. We sent the U.S. boomerang team to Australia wearing the International No Smoking logo. We won the World Championships. I'm the Don King of boomeranging. And lastly, this was the Marlboro Adventure Team, which we created. We called it the Barfboro Barfing Team. And we have our own barfmobiles going around in the West Coast to county fairs and so forth. I've brought you a message of love, I hope, today. This is a message from a cigarette model. His name was Dave Gerlitz. He's the bright one lighting up under the fuel tank there. He said he was on a shoot one day for Winston cigarettes, and he noticed none of the people from Winston cigarettes were smoking. And he said, how come none of you guys smoke? And he said, are you kidding? We wouldn't smoke that stuff. We reserve the right for the young, the poor, and the stupid. Well, with love, I want to thank you very much for the honor of speaking. It's a great privilege to be here. I hope we'll have an opportunity. Anyone wants to stay, I've got a couple more things. If you have any questions, this is my email, and I'd love to have anybody who'd like to get on this particular issue to work, to tip me off to some of the things that are going on in pharmacies. But I wish you very well in your careers, and you're going to be doing a great job.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Blum. I had forgotten we have an examination in here that starts in a few minutes. Dr. Blum would certainly be willing to visit with people. We can just step outside, and if there's a place you want to go, we can look at some other films. Thank you so much.